Hey, how you guys doing? It's first episode of the I Like the Way You Think Sir podcast, vlogcast, or whatever you want to call it. Just your boy Tony Pro.
This is Tree.
And originally our first topic was going to be on Tekashi 6ix9ine and his all foolishness and all that. But in light of the climate that we're in now, we just thought it'd be better to drop a video on the situations that are happening now, not even only with just George Floyd, but with police brutality and the militarization of the police as a whole.
Absolutely, and I think I would like for us to begin to think about how we can approach, how we can fight, how we can combat police brutality, and specifically, I've been trying to rewire how we claim things as a nation, as Black people. And I don't want to claim white supremacy at this point. I think the title that it deserves is white inferiority. When you go through history, any time in which they felt a need to oppress us is because they themselves felt inferior. Individuals, as a society, as a country, whatever the case may be.
He kind of actually put me into that mindset, that concept he was thinking of the inferiority of white people. And at first, I had some questions about it, but then I see where he's coming from. Because of that inferiority complex that they have, that leads to a lot of situations that can be deadly because they fear us.
We all have dealt with insecurities within ourselves as individuals, and we already know what that feels like. But imagine actively acting out on them in a way that is affecting that which you are feeling insecure about, if it's a person. So I'm not even really in a position to speak from a white person's head because I don't know what the fuck they thinking. But at the end of the day, clearly they must be insecure about something. They must be inferior about something. They must fear us because of whatever it is they are dealing with internally themselves throughout time. And that shows up in today's police.
In many cases, there is no threat. Eric Garner posed nothing but passive resistance. Keep your hands off me. Don't touch me. When he, in fact, was confronted.
Yeah.
There's another problem creeping into the culture of policing, has been for some time, and that is fear. Police officers, in my judgment, particularly white police officers, are excessively and disproportionately afraid. They sublimate this fear because it's not a socially acceptable emotion in the police culture, but they're afraid of young Black men. And the bigger the Black man, the darker the skin of the Black man, the more easy it is for police officers to dehumanize that individual and to compensate for their fear.
White cops that show up in neighborhoods that they've never been to, that they don't grow up in, or more so, just not having a sufficient amount of racial bias training or any at all, and pretty much being in fear immediately and coming into contact with we can say loud Black people, you know what I'm saying, and immediately being willing to draw their weapons or immediately being willing to take life because they are actually in fear of their own life. And of course, you have those who just don't give a fuck, and that's already their intention is, I'm gonna go kill somebody Black today.
Mm-hmm. And that goes into the humanization factor. I feel like we're not seen as humans, man, or lesser humans. I'm not gonna say all white people, but to a large majority, white people that are out there, they're not speaking up, or very few of them are speaking up. So we're gonna need them to go, if they claim to be for us and white allies, so to speak, you're gonna have to go and use your voice to defend your friends and family that you consider to be Black, and that's important. For sure. But we wanted to kind of have some action plans so we can do set in place that we can combat these systems of white supremacy and police brutality, and things that we can realistically do. Not something that's like going to take hundreds of years or we're not trying to change mindsets either. At least I'm not. I'm not interested in changing, converting racists to non-racists. I feel like that's not capable. We're not capable of doing that. So what things that could be put in place to police the police? We need to defund the police. These guys, and just New York City alone, is estimated around $6 billion of taxpayer money is going to the police department, which is entirely too much. We don't need, when there's grassroots organizations out there that are struggling, especially amidst the coronavirus, that are struggling for money and funding. we have an excess amount of money going into the police department that we can reallocate to these grassroots organizations that are literally helping the community. Not patrolling and terrorizing the community, but helping feed people and to shelter people and things of that sort, and to mentor people. We need more of those, because then we wouldn't need so much police, and like it could be more community outreach. I don't even like the word policing. More community outreach when there's situations, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be gang violence, whether it be all types of other stuff. There could be some more community intervention with that, and that's where we need to be reallocating that $6 billion budget that the NYPD currently has.
A great example is if we were to look at the Jewish community and look at how they have their shit structured. If some shit is going on, before cops get called, they handle that shit internally, yo. And that unity that they had, and just the overall structure that is within their communities is kind of where we're lacking. And so when we say defunding the police, we also need to say creating systems of our own security within our communities, where whether it's us or whether we're being specific about the police that are allowed, and I think this is something you were saying too, which is that if you're not from the community and you're a police, you're a cop, you're an officer, then you should not be allowed to go there.
And we see that already in society already with the fire department. Currently, and if you're an employee of the fire department, you're kind of mandated to live in these areas strictly on the basis that you need to be available to help with fires in that community that you're serving. And that similar concept could be put with the police department, and that would not eliminate all these type of bad situations, because there's bad people out there, you know what I mean? But at least when you're from that community, you know how, just how the people in that community talk to each other, how they communicate. They know when someone's being aggressive, when someone's just expressing their emotion.
It decreases that fear
fear level, because you go to that grocery store, so you know that, and you see that person that you may be stopping. Oh man, he's a good guy, man. This could be a misunderstanding, and that's what these other these police departments have with the communities of the same race that they have. That's the same type of relationship they have. They look beyond the situation and go into like the character of the person, because a lot of times they see another white person. Oh, boom, it could be a misunderstanding.
Chill.
They make a connection.
They approach it with so much tact, and
you know what I mean. And because they're not, the only images of black people, images on media or TV or radio, or you hear, there's a lot of negative images of both men and women. So they take that imagery, and then when they go out and do policing, if they have an interaction with a black person, they have that in the back of their mind, and they're quick to react. And this is just our opinions. This is not in fact, but I feel like that's a lot of the reasons we go through a lot of shit that we go through.
One way we can combat that, and not the only way, I think, because I definitely agree that it should be clear of who is allowed to come into the community and police. And I don't even like that word. Really protect and de-escalate situations, and if need be, handle the shit. If you gotta handle shit. Because at the end of the day, I'm not gonna say any names, but I've spoken with a black cop recently who's a part of the family, and he let me know from his side what it's like to be a cop, especially in these times, and get a phone call that there's somebody, an armed person in an area, and sometimes you do gotta show up, and it may be another black man, you a black cop, and there's another black man ready to take your life, and then what do you gotta do? So we got to be mindful of that, but also that's not the point. What we really need to look at is racial bias training amongst these white officers and their counterparts. So even if these white officers are from that community, I still feel like they need some racial bias training, because as you said, there's still throughout media, throughout society, throughout just natural upbringing, there are these stereotypes and archetypes of black individuals, whether they're men or women, that are indoctrinated into everyone's minds, not just white people, but black people themselves. If they see themselves on TV, especially if you're dark skinned, 9 times out of 10, if you're a dark skinned male, you aggressive and belligerent. Same thing for women. If you're light skinned, then it's a whole nother conversation. So at the end of the day, when we look at these stereotypes and how they affect our growth and our mentality around them, even if you're a white person from the neighborhood, I still need to know that some of that bias, that unconscious bias that you have, has been untrained.
I would hope so. If you were born and raised in a community like around black people, you could if you're, you know, competent enough and you look at your surroundings, that there are people that fit within that stereotype, and then there's people who definitely do not fit within that stereotype. I would hope so, but I guess, you know, I guess it wouldn't hurt to put a, you know, just an extra buffer in there between, just to get some of that.
We need that, bro, because they're killing us, bro. And I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty positive that there was a white officer from the community that he killed somebody in, and specifically a black person. I wouldn't be surprised if we could find that information. You know what I mean? So that alone is enough to say, okay, even if you're from the community and you're a white officer, you still need some form of rewiring of how you view and how you treat and process black people. You mentioned, and just us having dialogue before, what the origin of really, you know, these police forces are.
Slave patrols, in short, slave patrols. Right after or before the Civil War, during the Civil War, these organizations were created through towns just to make sure that there weren't any runaway slaves, or that slaves are going off to the north to fight against the South.
Right. So
primarily.
So in my head, if you black and you know that, if you didn't know that and now you know, get the fuck up out of there. Like, that's probably unrealistic, but that would be ideal. Realistically, them staying there, I think, you know, it's a different approach. It's not the same kind of thing, because it's one thing when you are not of a ethnic group of people and you are trained to be biased and to see people a certain way, and it's another part of the brain when you have images and things that are telling you this is how you are. You understand what I'm saying? Mm. So when it is something that's outside of yourself and outside of, you know, your ethnicity, I feel like it's different. I feel like it needs to be approached different, as opposed to it being racial bias training. It could be like, you know, self-empowerment training or something different, where it's just like you get to recognize that you're not limited to just that statistic or that stereotype. Mm. Now, when you're training a white person, the approach has to be a lot more aggressive, I feel.
I agree with that, because only because like I've heard some black people say, "Oh, if I see a group of black people walking down the street, I'm gonna cross the street." So that tells me that there's some black people that have
they're indoctrinated.
These negative concepts, or not even or ideas and stereotypes about their own people. Mm-hmm. So if, you know, maybe it's basically what you just said is that they both should have some. I think everybody should have some class about stereotypes and combating stereotypes. Mm-hmm. But again, like you said, I feel like because if you are a white person that would like to, you know, even if you are from the community and you want to police a predominantly black community, you should have some form of aggressive stereotype combative course. Or
honestly, high key, bro, I really feel like if you like, I don't feel like white people should be white officers should be in black communities at all. But again, we got to talk about what's realistic.
That would be some type of segregation or some for it. Now, having the police department and having a separate, not a militia group, but like a similar, you know, group of community leaders that go around and just protect the community that could be strictly black. That's realistic, though. Mm-hmm. I think we can definitely do that.
We can achieve that.
I think that's needed. I think that we should go ahead and just put that in.
I mean, you got to look at what we used to do in history. We had our block parties, and then we had like the neighborhood block watchers and stuff like that. And, you know, of course it changed, and it definitely got territorial, and we started, you know, gangs and all that kind of stuff. But if we can try to get, maybe not back to, but move forward to something new where it involves the leaders of the community setting up security in a way where it's not based on a police department, it's not based on necessarily a militia, but it's like, yo, we got this. Y'all don't need to come to our neighborhoods and racially profile and fuck shit up and use excessive force and violate our civil rights.
And even if you don't just say tell them to fuck off, like even if you just have a group of people who, whenever there's a call, they're there to just make sure shit doesn't go out of hand.
Right.
And it has to be agreed on within that community. Like, if the first people you call are the police, the second, right after that conversation with the cops, you need to be calling them. And it just needs to be a thing. Like,
I think it should be the other way around. Call your leaders first, and then the leader should be the one to be like, okay, this is worthy of bringing in some officers right now. I think it's very possible, because now it becomes a conversation of those leaders that are in those positions already establishing relationships and connections within the police forces that are in the surrounding area. So now, instead of just making a call to the general police department, you know who to call on. Okay, I need you. You call up specific officers to come to handle shit that you know you already got that trust and that rapport with. You know what I mean? So that's a larger conversation. I think one thing though that we can immediately begin to talk about and try to enforce is how we approach liability insurance with police. Pretty much, if we have it set up that when an officer decides to neglect and or use excessive force and or violate your civil rights or civil rights of a black person, their liability insurance needs to be revoked, because that is what is protecting them in those situations. It is literally protecting them in case they do those things. And so at this point, we have to say no. And it's not just protecting a specific officer, because an officer himself, you guys could look it up. You can go look up liability insurance for police and you can get a quote if you're an officer. So not only do officers can get them themselves, but the overall police departments have liability insurance in case their officers are fucking up.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a positive incentive. I mean, a negative incentive to go ahead and commit crimes, because you know that, if you do get a lawsuit, for one, when you commit a crime against an unarmed black person and you're a police officer, odds are you're gonna have the back of the DA, district attorney, you're gonna have the police department,
and you got the liability insurance back here.
And so that basically is a negative incentive for black people to be murdered and be used by police, because they know, for one, they're not going to get arrested, and two, they're not going to have to come out of pocket. So that is a great idea to point out.
The real issue is that they need to be arrested and convicted. But even still, you have police officers that, for example, they lose their jobs, but they still have their insurance, they still have their pension. Everything needs to be revoked from. And I honestly feel that with that being in place, it will decrease the amount of officers that are out here wilding. Because now, not only are you jeopardizing you and your family, but your whole department could get fucked. Your coworkers, your brothers in arms, you're jeopardizing them and their lives and their families, because your department could potentially get disbanded. Because if you don't got liability insurance, now you gotta pay out of pocket for them lawsuits. So we gotta attack this with commerce a little bit. You know what I mean? And that kind of goes into another point that I have, which is as far as attacking the commerce piece and the larger conversation of how black people can begin to arm themselves. I feel that we need to be paying attention to investing in and buying and banking black more, yo. At the end of the day, we have to think about the long-term changes and the long-term things we can do, because it's but so much we can try to get them to do. What is it that we can start doing? Again, with attacking them in commerce, taking our dollar away from them, saying no, we're not going to buy your shit. We're not gonna use your banks. We're not gonna apply for loans at your banks and use your creditors. If you go on the blackoutcoalition.org, is literally a complete list of all black-based banks and creditors in the U.S. So educate yourselves, inform yourselves, and I would highly suggest, shifting into banking black.
Yeah, that definitely speaks on the whole thing of black empowerment as a whole. Getting into the whole thing of police brutality and that whole thing, that aspect, I feel like one thing that we can do on a community-based level is to enhance on what David Dinkins was going to do, which is the first black mayor of New York. He was trying to implement these community-based boards, which he actually did complete, the community review boards that review interactions between police and civilians and minority communities. But I think we should expand on that and allow powers to either fire or get rid of these police officers, commissioners that have these track records of neglecting the community they're supposed to be serving. We need to go and enhance these programs, because, like I said, that will deter them too. When they know there's eyes on them that have the power to take their job away from them, that will give a hey in the back of their mind, let me not do this shit. Even if because I'm not into changing people's mindset, and I don't know if it's realistic to say white people can't be cops in black communities. So what you got to do is say, yo, bro, you can have your mentality that you have. You can do, even if you want to work here, but if you do decide to work here and you want to pull some bullshit, we're gonna have all eyes on deck, and shit might happen to you, regardless. Not on a physical sense, but attacking the dollar, like you said, on a specific level. You know, that's something that we can implement within the 2 years. We don't need to wait. We don't need to, like, pulling out all the money from the banks. That could take a while.
Specifically, white male societies, they literally plan shit hundreds of years ahead. The position that black people are in right now was decided hundreds of years ago. So when you look at how, unfortunately, impactful that level of planning is, we also have to now, for ourselves, begin to plan and strategize. And so in light of acknowledging and recognizing the immediate results that we can get and the things that we can achieve within the next 2 to 3 years, we got to look at the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. What can be done? Even 100 years, 200 years. How can we begin to tap into our intelligence and our organizing of black communities in a way that is going to create generational change, right? And so when it comes to banking black, that is a start, in my opinion, because now when it comes to, for example, if you want to get into real estate, or if you want to begin to change the community and reform the community, and you want to get into real estate, you're not going to a white bank to apply for a loan on a property. You're going to a black bank. If when it comes to circulating the dollar within the community, if we're already supporting black owned businesses, and of course, there are going to be black people that are still going to buy from, whoever. But if we begin to be more intentional about supporting black businesses, now we're keeping the dollar circulating around us, and we can start creating funds and all different types of shit that is specific to us. And I think that's very important in the long-term goals that we need to set, as well as the immediate goals. And I want to commend and uplift and say thank you to all of the people who are out protesting and risking their lives right now to basically be a symbol and to make a statement, and to pretty much be the backbone and on the front lines of what it is that we are dealing with right now in this country. However, I feel as though some of us, not all of us, but some of us need to be a little bit more informed on how we approach protesting. There are a lot of people that, whether they be undercover cops or, pretenders, white people that are seemingly about Black Lives Matter and things like that, that are initiating these protests and that are, making these posts, and then we see them, and because of our rage, because of our anger, because of what it is that we are dealing with, we are quick to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna show up. But we don't really know who's organizing these protests. We need to, if we're gonna protest, we need to, in my opinion, if I'm going to a protest, there needs to be a meeting the day before by the person who is leading the protest, or the persons that are leading the protest, and we need to have a conversation of what blocks we going on, all types of things like that, as opposed to just we see a photo on Instagram and it's like, oh, I'm gonna go to that one, or I'm gonna go to this one.
You could have a plan and stuff like that, but the police department is so heavily militarized that they have people on horseback and on like a cavalry fucking going towards the protesters, pushing them back, and then following the horses. They had people with rubber bullets and canisters. So you can have a plan, but that's why they have the police department anyway. It's to affect these planned protests and to disrupt them, which is unconstitutional, honestly, but that's the type of world that we live in now.
Well, again, going back to the social media piece and speaking on the people that are posting a day in advance where a protest is going to be. And then there are also people that, like, for example, in my opinion, the whole social media blackout, I think, in my opinion, is really dumb, because especially for people that have large followings and are Black people of color, for you to not take the opportunity to use your platform to inform people on what they can be doing right now, whether that be voting on certain links to make sure that they put away all 4 of the officers, or paying attention to the preliminary election that's going on and making sure that you get your votes in there. There are a lot of people that would just like impulsively just like, okay, I'm just gonna, it's like a trend. It's like, okay, I'm gonna put a Black photo up, and I get it. I understand there's symbolism and there's, solidarity in that, but we have to look at the informative piece. It's like, yo, use your platforms right now to speak out on what's going on, whether you're speaking through art forms, dance, music. And I've seen people in the dance community say, I'm not going to dance for a couple of days, or I'm not going to do music. But then on the flip side, I've seen musicians, or I've seen artists, you know, put out a song or something like that that's speaking out against the brutality that's happening, that's speaking out against the white, as I like to say, inferiority that's happening, or speaking out against just the situations in general that's been going on throughout history. And to get back on topic as far as informing ourselves through, you know, our protests, not only should we be mindful of, you know, who's leading them, and maybe having organized meetings before we go and do protests, where maybe we don't post what's going to happen because we already met up and we already know, and we just sending text messages and stuff like that. So that way the cops are not already pre-set up in areas because they don't even know, because we didn't post it publicly on social media. That's smart, right? On the same time, when we go and protest, a lot of us are going and we're not protected. We're not protecting ourselves. We're not bringing the necessary gear. I think it would be smart for everybody to be in a solid color, all black, on some militant shit, where it's like they not gonna be able to trace you down and know, you know, take a photo and be able to, you know, photo identify you at the end of the day and find your address and be like, oh, that was the person that was leading that protest. Let's go to their house after this whole shit is settled down and fuck shit up. They're not gonna be able to do that if we are covering ourselves and we are making sure that we're not exposed.
I'm not worried about people coming into my house and following me after a protest to see where I live and attacking me. I'm not worried about that. If I'm here to just protest and be heard, I want you to see my face. I want you to know exactly. I don't care if you know where I live. Like, I'm not worried about that. Like, I'm not worried about hiding my identity. Now, if I had some insidious side things, I would want to cover my face and my, you know, make sure that they don't know my identity because I have this. But I just want to be heard, you know.
Well, even the peaceful protesters are still getting shot in the face by rubber bullets.
I mean, that's a fact.
Whether you are being insidious or not, you still are in danger just by the fact that you're protesting. Yeah. So, but to the point of being identified, I think I think it's necessary to cover up, at least. You know what I mean? And you know, whether that be covering your face, covering up your tats, covering up your hairstyle, and all that kind of stuff. I think it's necessary, and also bring certain shit with you. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, that's always good. Be prepared.
You know, I'm not saying bring weapons, but, and I'm sure there are people out there doing that, but I just wanted to, you know, just further, you know, push that message of it. Like, yo, if you're gonna protest, be prepared, be informed on the protest. You know what I mean? If you're gonna start one, make sure that, you know, you're letting people know what's going on. Not necessarily through social media, but like having meetings or something like that. You know, I wanted to provide some information. Of course, I wanted to empathize and speak to all of my black counterparts and people of color that are going through what we're going through. And I want to also emphasize that, you know, in your rage, in your anger, be gentle with yourself. Try to find moments of joy throughout the day. You know, because we also need to pay attention to our mental health and our emotional health.
I just wanted to send my deepest condolences to Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, and the hundreds of thousands of unarmed black people that died under the police department. These are just a couple of things that you can put in action right now to affect some kind of sort of change. Though this is just the tip of the iceberg, and you know, there's more shit that we need to get into. For sure.
Absolutely.
It's your boy Tony Pro.
This is Tree. Thank you guys for tuning in. That's a wrap. And yeah, see you next time. Peace and love.